The sunset cast long shadows over the bustling streets of the city. Calvin Williams, a 12-year-old boy with messy hair and tattered clothes, weaved through the hurrying crowds. His once bright blue eyes had turned dull from hunger and exhaustion. Something good has to happen today, Calvin thought, his growling stomach leaving him no choice but to seize any opportunity he could find. His small, calloused hands rummaged through a trash bin, hoping to uncover something edible. The stench was nauseating, making his stomach churn, but hunger overpowered any sense of disgust. Finally, he found a stale piece of bread and quickly stuffed it into the torn pocket of his pants. "Hey kid, get out of here. I don't want dirty brats hanging around," an irate shopkeeper shouted, gripping a broom tightly. "Sorry, sir. I'm leaving right away." Calvin stammered, his voice trembling with fear. He quickened his pace, his heart pounding. But just as he scanned his surroundings, his eyes caught sight of a well-dressed middle-aged man walking down the street. The man seemed wealthy and was deeply engrossed in a phone call, oblivious to an oncoming car speeding toward him. Without a second thought, Calvin sprinted forward and shoved the man out of harm's way. The forceful push saved the man's life, but left Calvin injured in the process. Gerald Hawkins opened his eyes amidst the blinding glare of the ambulance lights, seeing a small boy with messy hair and a dirt-streaked face. Calvin's clear blue eyes reflected deep worry as he stood trembling, but resolutely by Gerald's side. "Are you all right?" Calvin asked in a soft voice. Gerald weakly nodded, waves of pain coursing through his body, but a profound sense of gratitude filling his heart. "You saved my life," Gerald murmured. Calvin gave a faint smile. "I just did what anyone would do." The boy expected nothing in return, but in that moment, Gerald sensed something extraordinary about him. Perhaps it was his courage, his sincerity, or the quiet sadness no child should bear. Gerald wanted to say more, but the paramedics quickly placed him on a stretcher, preparing to transport him to the hospital. Hours later, Gerald woke up in a hospital room, his arm carefully bandaged. He couldn't recall much about the accident, but Calvin's eyes and his heroic act lingered in his mind. When a nurse entered to check on him, Gerald immediately asked, "Where's the boy? The one who saved me?" Moments later, Calvin was brought into the room. He stood hesitantly, looking nervous, as if expecting to be asked to leave at any moment. Gerald smiled warmly at him. "Thank you, Calvin. If it weren't for you, I don't know what would have happened to me. I owe you a debt." Calvin hesitated, his face reflecting confusion. He wasn't used to being acknowledged, let alone owed anything, and hearing such words from a wealthy man like Gerald felt utterly foreign. "I don't need anything," Calvin stammered, lowering his head. But then he glanced up, a rare glimmer of hope flickering in his eyes. "Actually, if it's not too much, I do have a request." Gerald tilted his head curiously. "Go ahead, son." Calvin hesitated, as if afraid his words would be dismissed. "Could you pretend to be my dad for a day? I just want to know what it feels like to have a family." The simplicity and sincerity of the request caught Gerald off guard. He had prepared himself for requests for money or clothes, but this was something he had never expected. Gerald looked at the frail, wounded boy before him and saw a deep yearning in his eyes. "All right, Calvin. I'll do it," Gerald said, a warm smile spreading across his face. "Tomorrow, we'll spend the day as father and son." The next day, Gerald took Calvin to a large amusement park. For the first time in his life, Calvin had a proper breakfast, wore clean clothes, and walked beside his father to places he had only dreamed of. As they entered the park's gates, Calvin's eyes lit up like tiny beacons in the darkness. Gerald noticed the smile on the boy's face, a smile that had likely been buried under years of hardship. "Mr. Gerald, can we try that roller coaster?" Calvin pointed at a towering structure snaking through the sky. "Of course, son," Gerald replied, surprised at how naturally the word son rolled off his tongue. They spent the entire day together, from thrilling rides to eating ice cream on a park bench. Calvin shared stories of his life on the streets, the struggles he faced daily just to survive. Gerald listened intently, his heart heavy with compassion. He realized that while he had all the wealth in the world, this boy possessed something he lacked: courage in the face of adversity. As the day drew to a close, Gerald and Calvin sat on a long bench overlooking a lake reflecting the golden hues of the sunset. "Thank you, Mr. Hawkins. Today was the best day of my life." Calvin said, his voice trembling with emotion. "Calvin, I should be the one thanking you. You didn't just save my life. You reminded me that what truly matters isn't success or wealth, but the connections we make with others." That evening, as Gerald took Calvin back to the hospital for a checkup on his minor injuries, a significant secret came to light. While Calvin was busy talking with a nurse, Gerald noticed an old photograph slipping out of the boy's pocket. It was a picture of a woman, one Gerald instantly recognized. "Evelyn," Gerald whispered, his hands trembling as he picked up the photo. It was his wife, who had gone missing years ago. Calvin noticed Gerald's reaction and nervously asked, "Do you know her?" Gerald nodded, tears welling in his eyes. "She's my wife. Where did you find this?" Calvin explained that he had found the photograph in an alley where he often scavenged for food. "I don't know who she is, but she looked so sad." A storm of emotions surged within Gerald. He had spent years searching for Evelyn, and now, thanks to Calvin, he had a lead. "We're going to find her," Gerald said, placing a hand on Calvin's shoulder. "And if you're willing, we'll do it together." In the following days, Gerald and Calvin immersed themselves in the search for Evelyn. They wandered through dark alleys, questioned the homeless, and visited numerous shelters. Each place they went to offered a glimmer of hope, only to be followed by endless disappointment. Calvin witnessed Gerald's patience and determination, and he slowly began to see him as a true father. In helping Gerald search for his wife, Calvin also discovered something about himself, that he was a child deserving of love and protection. One night, in a crowded homeless community, they found Evelyn. She was huddled on a bench, clutching a baby tightly in her arms. Gerald approached cautiously, his heart pounding in his chest. "Evelyn, it's me, Gerald." Evelyn looked up, her gaze distant and confused, but slowly recognition dawned on her face. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she realized she had finally been found. Evelyn was brought back to Gerald's home, where Calvin finally understood the true meaning of family. They were no longer strangers brought together by circumstance, but had become perfect pieces of a happy picture. Gerald formally adopted Calvin, ensuring that the boy would never have to live on the streets again. In that moment, Calvin gained not just a father, but also a family, a dream he once thought would forever be out of reach. After days of searching, Gerald finally found his wife, Evelyn. She had been living with amnesia, caring for a child, and unable to recall her past. With Calvin's help, Gerald persuaded Evelyn to return home. Together, the three of them, Gerald, Evelyn, and Calvin, began building a new life, healing the wounds of the past. Now officially adopted, Calvin finally had what he had always longed for, a real family. No longer just a street child, he had become an indispensable part of the Hawkins family. The story of Calvin and Gerald serves as a powerful testament to the strength of kindness, courage, and genuine love. In a world full of challenges and hardships, sometimes a single act of selflessness can completely transform someone's life. Calvin, a mere street boy, risked his life to save a stranger he had never met. That act not only saved Gerald, but also opened a new chapter for both of them. Gerald, once a wealthy but lonely man, realized that the true treasures in life were not material wealth or status, but the heartfelt connections between people. Calvin's presence not only helped Gerald reunite with his family, but also reignited a love within him that had long been forgotten. This story reminds us that everyone, regardless of their circumstances, deserves to be loved and cared for. Sometimes, the most unexpected moments can offer the greatest opportunities for change. Be brave enough to love and spread kindness. You never know. You might just be the miracle in someone else's life. If you found this story meaningful, don't forget to hit the subscribe button to follow Life Stories 365 for more amazing tales. We aim to bring you inspiring and heartwarming stories every day. Let's spread the message of love and hope to everyone around us.